Hey, Jen.
Hi!
I did it!
Yay!
Hi!
We can
Welcome to
do
my
hard
first
things.
live.
Yay! Oh, that feels so special.
It is. You get to be a part of it. I'm happy it's with you.
Oh, me too.
How are you feeling today?
Um, let's be vulnerable and honest with the world. Um, so sad.
Oh, uh-huh.
So sad.
Yeah, I
And I
feel
think
you.
that's okay. I think that's okay. I think most of us are probably in our feelings right now more than ever.
Yeah, that's right. It's totally okay to be sad.
How are you?
I'm okay today. I'm excited about this.
Me
I'm
too.
hot as shit in my house as always because I'm too cheap to get an air conditioner.
That's You're saving the environment one sweaty thigh at a time.
Wait, that's such a good reframe. Thank you.
You're so welcome.
Love that. All right. You know what I want to ask you before we really get started is when
Yeah.
this ends, can I like save it to post somewhere or just like to have it for
It'll
me?
give you an automatic option to post it, and then I know how to rip the video out of Instagram, so we have it for forever.
Of course you do. Thank you. I was talking to my husband who knows nothing about Instagram. I'm like, I want to be able to say this. He's like, I'm sure Em knows. Like he doesn't even know you, but he's like, I'm sure. I'm sure they know.
It's true.
All right. Should we get started?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's do introductions.
Perfect.
All right, so I am Sam. I'm an eating disorder therapist in Western New York, and I'm a novice activist and an amateur baker, married to an angel in human form and a chihuahua and kitty mom. I created Body Liberated Buffalo. We actually just had our first year anniversary, like
Yeah.
our first birthday. I know it was really great. Took little pictures with Larry the Chihuahua having a cupcake or a donut. I know, right? And I created this. Really, the goals have like changed since I started because we're always learning and growing. But initially, I just wanted this to be like a community for people interested in body liberation, fat liberation. And then a second goal was to create this resource directory for Western New York so people know, where can I get a massage? And I know that the table will hold me. Where can I see a therapist? And I know they're not going to tell me to lose weight. So those were like the very kind of minimal first goals. And we've really come a long way with like trying to include intersectionality and making sure that we're supporting folks. So like all marginalized identities, because boy, I've learned really quick, like you can't just do one, can you?
No.
That's not a thing, right?
No.
All we learn. So how we came to this Instagram takeover is I have an advisory board, and I collected this advisory board and wanted them to get together so that as I move forward with Body Liberate Buffalo, it's not just movement based on my perceptions and my experiences as a straight-sized, white female. And the difficulty with that is like I run all of our social medias, right? So like I have this group that kind of guides me, but like I'm the one on the ground, so it's hard not to have that lens be on the forefront. So I asked, my advisory board about that, and they were like, "How about Instagram takeover?" And I was like, "Oh shit, that makes total sense. Like I definitely want to do that." So I kind of made my list in my head of who I wanted to ask, and I thought of you. You were at the top of the list. I was like, "Who's that person with
Oh,
the really cool glasses?"
oh yay.
Right? Because I've seen you in like trainings and on panels, and I was like, I'm looking through my Instagram, like, I know I'm gonna find them, and then there you were. And I'm so grateful that you said yes and we get to spend this week together.
Oh, I'm so excited. So, I guess I'll introduce myself. I'm M. My pronouns are they, them. I am a board member with Project Heal, which is why we're asking you to donate money there today, even if it's just a dollar. A dollar helps pay for insurance navigation support for somebody. I could plug Project Heal all day. When I'm not doing board work, I run a private practice part-time with my partner, and we treat eating disorders specifically in the transgender conforming community. And I run a eating disorder program nationally that is the first of its kind. It's for queer people, by queer people, and we focus on full body intersectionality. So, you know, right now we're talking a lot about what's going on in the world. So, you know, therapists can't assist it. But I was so excited when you asked me to do this. I feel like this is such a beautiful way for us to also show people, like, sometimes just like giving someone a week to have a voice somewhere else is actually enough. Like sometimes we don't have to do these big grandiose things, because now people that have never seen my face or heard my voice will hear that and see that. And now I'm thinking of like all like the Black queer people I know that should get this in my space. So now I'm gonna go find someone and pay someone to do it in my space. And then maybe other people that are watching that have followers will do the same thing. And then we're giving everyone the platform that they should have had to begin with.
I love how you just described this domino effect. And it does feel, it feels strong with like minimal effort.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I hope like this wasn't like in this incredible amount of work and it should totally be paid for. But I think it's got like a great reach, because now we're reaching like your audience and my audience on social media.
Yeah, it's been fabulous.
All right. So we're going to start with chatting about allyship, obviously. And I'm really glad that we're going to dig into this, because it's important to me, because I call myself an ally, but also because of the page I run. I get a lot of folks that come to me that want to be allies or call themselves that, but they're so afraid of making mistakes or doing harm to the population they want to support that they end up being quiet. Or not using the privilege to like the best ability that they can, because they're so afraid, which I totally get that fear, right? We're all afraid of like making mistakes, especially if we're people pleasers like me over here. So we're going to talk about like what is true allyship, maybe what it looks like for me, what does it look like for you, and also knowing like this isn't the answer, right? Because I think for folks like me also, we're like looking for the in, like where is the truth? Where is like the one perfect way to be an ally? I want to make sure I'm doing this perfectly correct. But like there's no population that's like a monolith. Like we don't know. There is no right answer. This is just like what feels right for me and what feels right for you.
Agreed. And that's the thing. It's like allyship is as an individual for the person that you're trying to be an ally to as anything else is in the world, because what I need as like a queer fat person is going to be really different than someone else in a similar body with a similar life, because their needs emotionally and physically are just going to be different. And that does make it hard when we're trying to figure that out, because then it's a little like I have to custom make my allyship every time I meet someone. Like that's a lot of work. It really is.
For allies, yeah.
And I think sometimes when people see the amount of work that takes, we also see how mistakes are so easily made, and that's where the fear comes in. So I always tell allies, like, step number one, learn the definition of implicit bias. If you don't know it, know that we all have it. We're all a little racist. We're all a little transphobic. We're all a little fat phobic, whether it's internalized or not. And that's okay. Like, that's why the definition of implicit bias exists, because we all are raised in a culture that gives us ideas and thoughts and feelings that probably we don't even know are there.
Yeah.
And what if instead of like me getting really angry at your mistake, I said, wow, that was really fat phobic. And instead of being offensive, you could just say, I'm really sorry that I harmed you. I have a lot of unlearning to do.
That sounds so good, and it's ideal. I'm just thinking of like the levels that have to be there, right? Like you have to be in a place where you can receive harm, but then be able to teach and give feedback. And I have to be in a place where I don't get angry and defensive and can acknowledge the harm that I've done, but like not lose my steam to move forward. I feel like the planets have to align perfectly for this type of experience, but it's totally doable.
No, they do. And I feel like, obviously I can say that as someone who's like, not just a therapist, but been in a ton of therapy and like done a ton of work on myself around this. So I can also look at harm a little differently than I maybe did even 5 years ago. Whereas 5 years ago, I still had my own internalized fat phobia. So when other people did it, it just cemented the internal message. Whereas now I just feel really sad when people say stuff like that. I don't even think it harms me as much personally more, because I'm just like, it's really sad that the way that you see the world is through body size.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good sign of healing when other people can do something that's harmful, but you feel sad for them and you feel compassion because you know it's a reflection of their pain and their like misunderstanding.
Yeah.
Yeah, and let's acknowledge our privilege as like a therapist to therapist talking about this shit, right? Like,
Oh, of
of course,
course.
it feels like easy for us or easier.
Well, I mean, no one is seeing what we were like before we became therapists, which was like, first of all, I would never have wanted that recorded for anyone to ever watch later on. But I mean, I can be really honest. Like, I was raised in a family full of activists. So I have been around activists my whole life. And my grandfather did civil rights work during Jim Crow. So my privilege isn't just the privilege of being a therapist. It was being raised around these people, which is like such a rich experience that like no amount of money could have ever bought. But it also meant that I thought I knew things that I didn't.
Oh yeah.
Because there's no way I could ever be racist or homophobic if the people that I come from fought for the rights of those people. And it means they could never be racist in my brain. But the more that I learned and the more that I unlearned, the more that I realized that like that's actually like the white supremacist thing and how it even gets into activism is that if you're an activist and an ally, you can never do wrong because you've now earned this label as if it's an adjective when really like allyship is a verb. It's an action. You have to do it over and over. You have to tweak it every time. And you do have to face hurting people instead of helping them. And it's really hard because sometimes we have the best intentions and we don't know.
Yeah. We don't know until we make mistakes and someone corrects us, and that's really uncomfortable. And that's especially uncomfortable for this population that could be an ally to folks in larger bodies and people with marginalized identities, because the amount of times that I get called out as a thin white person that's fairly intelligent and kind of affluent is about zero. And then I enter this space and I'm like, boo, boo, dodge, dodge, cry, cry, shit, shit. Like, it's just a very new feeling for folks that are privileged to be told, like, hey, you're doing something wrong.
Yep. Especially if you're doing the cultural norm that if you're trying to be an ally, then there's a part of you that knows it's wrong, but there's another part of you that's already programmed to do it. Which, again, isn't your fault. It's just like we're all kind of unlearning and learning that we actually don't know most of the things that we should know.
Yeah, that's really well said. That's right. That also makes me think of like, can we normalize and like tell allies that it's okay to have absolutely any feelings? Like, it's okay to feel angry when someone tells you did something wrong. It's okay to feel guilty. It's okay to feel scared. Like, it's just what we do with those feelings. Like, no one's telling thin white people, like, you're not allowed to have feelings. It's just about, like, not centering those feelings or not having that, letting them, like, stop you from taking action. Like, bring all the feelings. Like, it's okay. They can join the party.
Yeah. I mean, if you shut those feelings off, how can you be any kind of ally to begin with? Like, allyship comes with a fuckload of feelings. Like, it's passion, it's drive, and it's this sense of justice. Like, all of those are like really fiery elements, which means when you make a mistake, you're going to have a fiery response.
Yeah, that's really well said. So you said there's kind of this level one foundation of allyship, which is recognizing your internal bias. And I think we hear a lot like, do the work, do the work. So is that what you mean by that? It's like acknowledging your own internal biases and working through them?
Yeah, and I mean, like, I suggest to everyone, so I'm a nerd, so I'm like, Project Implicit through Harvard, the only time, like, rich white people have done something good is they, if you go to their website, they have an implicit bias assessment that you can take, and it tells you the areas of which you actually hold implicit bias, which is really amazing. And I've done it before, and when I teach, I make my students do it when I remember being the operative word. And I have found it really helpful to have not a person but a system tell me statistically I am most likely these things start there. And then I look for books on those things. So if I don't want to be racist, then I better be following Black queer people on my Instagram. I better be buying their books, hanging their art in my house, and almost like overcorrecting until I finally figure out, of that art, what do I like to look at in my home? Of that music, what am I glad I'm incorporating into my life? And then what was once an implicit bias can actually become this beautiful appreciation of what other people that are different than you offer, not only our individual lives, but like the world. Because the world was colonized by white people, but it was not created by them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I really like this because maybe other allies can relate. If when I think about like art or books or anything created by folks that don't look like me, I think that's not for me. So like I don't want to take that away from them. Like that feels sacred to their culture. So I'll just like I'll stay in my little white world.
Which I mean, I think that some of that is true in the sense that, and this is like my favorite stereotypical example, like when you meet someone that's like read a bunch of, say, like indigenous myths, and now they're buying like a ton of dream catchers and like all this stuff that's like appropriation, right? That's different than me going on Etsy and finding like a queer Black artist who makes work of like fat Black bodies and finding one I think is beautiful and hanging it in my office where I can see it, so that every day I'm reminded of why my implicit bias is wrong and how valuable it is to do little things like that. Because that brings me joy and education. It means that I'm a better person for the people I'm around, and it means that person maybe got to have dinner that night. Because artists make no money.
Of course, that's right. Yeah, so the difference between like appropriation and appreciation, right? Like not taking those that culture and those behaviors as our own, but just like paying for it, appreciating it, reading it, enjoying it. Of course, that's okay.
And I think it's necessary. I mean, not for nothing. And I talk about white culture like when I teach, and I always joke like it's like Wonder Bread and mayo and like Oscar Mayer bologna. Like a lot of white culture isn't actually that tasty or fun, or like a lot of it is boring if we look at traditional white culture. So the truth is most of us that enjoy the fun things in life are enjoying pieces of someone else's culture anyway. So it's also figuring out what have you enjoyed all along.
Right. Okay. That's really good. Yeah, because if we just boiled it down to like white people stuff, it's not so great.
Yeah.
It's really unseasoned.
I mean, sorry, my grandma was like, so I had like one of my grandmothers like Oregon trailed it in Nebraska. And when you look at the recipes of her people,
No,
that is not the food that my parents grew up making. No, they made the food from the Jewish and the Italian side of my family, where there was culture, there was meaning, and it was delicious. And every friend wanted to come over for those meals because that was way better than the casserole.
of course. Yeah, what the casserole? Just like noodles and peas and like a can of chicken noodle soup or something.
Yep. Which all food is good food, and I personally prefer like some Sazone and a little chili pepper and like some curry as opposed to chicken noodle soup.
Yes, absolutely. You're right. All food is good food, and I'm still going to pick on the boring food.
Yep.
Tell me the name of that test through Harvard again. I want to put it in my link tree for people.
Oh, it's called Project Implicit.
Okay, cool. Okay. Can you talk a little bit? We've been posting about kind of being Hays informed and like just as this like bare minimum, and that allyship is a lot more than just like compassion, right?
Yeah.
Can you talk more about that?
So this is, again, for everyone watching, these are my personal opinions, so take that for what that is. Hays and being anti-diet is great, and I think that's a great start, but that doesn't solve the fact that we've all been royally wrecked by the system, and that doesn't really make you an ally. It just makes you a better person. like it makes you a good person. Like I feel like Hayes was like lifted to being this almighty thing, and when I read through it, I'm like, you want me to respect people's bodily autonomy and ask their permission before I talk about their body and give them fair and equitable health access? Like that's just not being an asshole.
Right. Yeah.
So like if you look at it that way, I'm like, no, my allies need to do more than be able to spout off like the 5 principles of Hayes or intuitive eating or even like understanding anti-diet. It needs to be a systemic understanding of why we think that's so great to begin with, which is like those are the scraps that we get to see and that we're allowed to work with. But like if we really decolonize when we talk about food and bodies, we all have to unlearn everything we've ever learned. And so that's a lot of work. And that's asking allies and like comrades for so much more than just like know the rhetoric and speak for me when I can't and give me the stage when I need it. That is saying that I need you to understand that your entire existence exists because of the oppression of mine or bodies less privileged than mine.
Right. Right. And then we need to be able to hold that and not let it like suffocate us.
Yeah.
Because there is innate guilt in that, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But it's it's not individual, right? We need to always remember this is systemic. So like, it's okay to feel the guilt, and then like, you didn't personally do this, you know, Sarah from Ohio.
Yeah. In fact, what the system has done is what I think is the smartest thing white supremacy could ever do, which is it goes, you get more privilege than me because of your body. And now I'm mad at you personally, instead of being mad at the fact that the system allowed for that disparity to exist. We then fight with each other. You're afraid to support me and I'm angry at you. And the system pulls the strings.
Ooh, that makes me angry.
Yeah. But we can just be angry together and challenge the system and recognize that in times where I or someone less privileged than me needs more privilege, there are people that will step up for us and give us that platform, right? Or be those voices or pull those strings until there are no strings left to pull.
Yeah, so this was a conversation I had with my husband a while ago, and what you said just made so much sense to me. I was kind of complaining about like all the fighting that happens within the group and us attacking each other when we all feel like we have the same goal. And he said like, but what if you're the only people that will listen, right? So if someone in this group I want to support with a marginalized identity is feeling angry at the oppression on them, like who are they going to yell at? I'm here, I'm present, and I may even do something about it and have a reaction, while people outside of this group that don't give a shit about oppression, they're not listening. They're not even in the same room. So that really helped me think like I can hold space for that a lot easier because I'm here and I can take it.
Yep. And it means you're safe, right? This goes back to like Psych 101 for anyone that ever took a psych class, right? The basic principle is the safer someone is, the more likely you are to take out their shit on them. And so I think the other thing is like to be an ally is to understand that you might have to have some of those experiences before it's comfortable. And you have to both be okay with the uncomfortable and understand that like there's a privilege in me feeling comfortable enough to be mad at you, because it means you're safe to be mad at. And it means you're safe for me to express that and know that my life and livelihood is not threatened. And when you look at it that way, anytime someone is upset for the harm you've caused and they're able to tell you, that is the most amazing thing. Because you best believe out in the real world, if I'm upset with a neighbor, I'm not saying anything because they might kill me.
Right. Damn, that's so brilliant. Thank you for saying all that. I was like sighing. Whew, that's so good. All right. The kind of like bare minimum, fighting your own internalized fat phobia, being anti-diet, being Hayes. It reminds me of like in healthcare when you become trauma informed and you're like, this all makes so much sense. Like, of course. And then you're doing it for a while and you're like, this is just how I'm not an asshole and I make people feel safe. Why is everyone not doing that? So like it feels really big and fresh and new and like this huge undertaking. But after you've been doing it for a while, you're like, this is like the floor. Like this is nothing.
No, it's exactly the same thing. And in fact, a lot of the trainings I do on trauma, I always tell people trauma-informed care is the minimum standard. That is like my favorite thing to say to people. I always encourage people to look at this model called healing-centered engagement. It was originally created for basically Black kids in inner city schools so that the school systems could replace how broken our system was for them, but it allowed space for actual healing to happen. And it meant that kids that were kind of being taught in a school that held that framework were actually less likely to experience the systemic pitfalls of being young and Black in America. Like less of them were going to prison, less of them were going to juvenile detention, less of them were stealing things, because all of those behaviors are just behaviors to survive. But when they saw that they didn't do that anymore, it was okay. And it looks at trauma from the full macro micro lens. So like globally, our world's been traumatized by colonizing. Nationally, our world's been traumatized by both colonizing and white supremacy. And then you move into your state and the town that you live in and the school system that you're in and the community that you're in, and it picks apart every place in which that system has failed and what it's actually a much cooler way to like look at a human being when you meet them, because you can actually start to see that line of everything that historically has happened that ended to that person's experience, which is like, I'm just like a big nerd about history. So like to me, I'm like, it's amazing to think that like I can look at the 13 colonies and go, yes, that's why that experience is happening today. Because how long ago was that we're still suffering in our bodies because of that?
And doesn't that create more compassion to be able to see this direct line? It's not this individual who has complete, and we love personal responsibility in this country, right? Bootstrap and just do your best, and like everyone can heal themselves, which leaves out all this context of these, all of the traumas of like all the macro and micro you just listed.
Well, I mean, if we ignore the reality of how people end up how they are, we can keep selling the American dream as something realistic.
Got it. Dropping it. Yep. I was wondering if you would feel comfortable talking about any like mistakes you see allies make, because we're all so terrified of making them. Like maybe we can just call some of them out.
Yeah. This is good. I think in group settings, a lot of times allies get so excited that they forget that the people they're trying to be allies to are in the room. So I see that happen a lot. And I'm going to say, right, as a white person, I've done that. So I own that as a mistake I make. And for anybody that knows me personally, I could talk for days. I was built to be a therapist. I was built to talk for people back to back for 10 hours a day. So if you put me in a room and you go, let's talk about something you're passionate about, my little neurodivergent brain forgets anybody in the room. And it's like, would you like to know all the statistics and all the facts? But the people that are affected by those statistics and facts are sitting right in front of me.
Yes. Yeah. That makes me think of, and I have absolutely been guilty of this on social media, and I've seen other allies do it, where we use points of like oppression and just terrible things that have happened to folks with marginalized identities as like proof of the work we need to do, but we're just like re-traumatizing others. Like, look at this terrible thing and look at this terrible thing, and forgetting like that happened to a real person that traumatized them, and now we're sharing this information and traumatizing others, but I'm so detached from it. I just feel like, look at me, like I'm sharing these things because I want people to never do it again. But like we need to like be so much more gentle with that kind of stuff.
Agreed. And I think the biggest thing I've noticed personally and that I've experienced is like, and you've done this, which is beautiful. Why are you not consulting with me and asking me what I want my allyship to be for me? Why are you making that decision for me in a system that's already made every decision for me? Like as a trans person born with a uterus, my whole life's just been decided.
Right.
But having someone say to me, what do you want? How do you want your voice to be centered? How can I support you? Right? such a really easy way to show someone you're trying to be an ally, and you usually avoid mistakes that way.
Yes, yes. When I first started BLB, we went really hard on like the service approach, right? So we're going to run support groups and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And I had one of the board members tell me like, I've had literally just the same language you used. I've had people tell me what I should do with my body my entire life, and now you're just another person doing that, but with good intentions. And I was like, fuck, okay, let me like step back and shut up and listen.
Yep.
Because we don't have to work so hard. Like we
Yep.
think we're doing well, but like I actually can do less work if I would just shut up and ask you what you need from me.
Right. And I feel like, especially in the mental health field where like the power dynamic is their experts and then their clients, I think we're also trained, right? So I'm going to say for me, I was trained, especially with our therapist, to hold space and the container and the witnessing and all the good stuff. But ultimately, I'm the expert. And the only expert on you is you, and the only expert on me is me. So why do we treat anything in our system any differently?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's absolutely right. There's always this kind of thing in my mind, like, okay, I'll be listening, but I always know, I know the answer. Like I know what's actually best.
Yep.
Nope, no, I don't. I don't know.
I
A lot
want
of
to know what's
shit
best for
really
me
okay.
at the time.
Yes, that's right. I don't even know. Do I want coffee or do I not want coffee? What's going on in my life?
It's true.
Any other like common ally missteps that are coming to mind for you?
I'm gonna think of mistakes I've made, which is like, so like if you're an ally that likes to go to say protests or like different political functions, things I've learned that are like kind of normal protest things that like no one taught me. And so I learned by not doing them and having someone step in and tell me that I wasn't doing something I was supposed to do. It was really beautiful. It was actually like at an art therapy conference, and there was this whole thing in the art therapy field where like Karen Pence liked art therapy and wanted the Art Therapy Association to come in, and those of us that were greatly affected by that political regime said, please do not make those choices for us when we pay our dues to this organization. And so at the conference, there ended up being a very heated public conversation where a white therapist was attacking a therapist of color. And I did not know that when you protest and someone is being attacked, you as the person with a privileged body physically steps in between them to block that person from experiencing harm so that they can see that they're supported. And what that told me is that I was comfortable watching someone else be harmed when I could say something. And I think that is the most common mistake that all allies make, is that we're so afraid or uncomfortable watching that in that moment that we get paralyzed and we don't step up. And how is my discomfort somehow greater than the person being attacked or harmed? It's not. In fact, my discomfort doesn't matter in that moment. So I learned how to physically use my body, right? It's the one time where I'm like, fuck yeah, having a big body is great. I can actually shield you from this harm if I don't have the words to stop it. And what that taught me is often it's those little things that allies can do, which is like, if you see me being harmed, you can ask me gently if I'd like you to step in. You don't have to necessarily step in if you're not sure that's what I want. But even squeezing my hand, right? Or sending me a DM on Zoom or texting someone in a meeting, right? Those really little things are so helpful. Again, they take so little effort. And even if the harm continues, I know there's someone witnessing me and holding me, and that's going to be available for me when that's done.
Oh, yeah. Instead of getting frozen, afraid of our own discomfort, not knowing what to do, which is all valid, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's an intimidating experience. You don't want to make it worse. You may be afraid yourself. Yep. And yet, again, when you have privilege, like it doesn't take much to make an impact. Like it's just like our minimal efforts are often like so impactful.
Agreed. And I think our culture puts allyship in this like rescuer, perpetrator, victim triangle that we see so often. And so I think what's often missed is because if it's not a heroic gesture, then it can't be allyship. But the most heroic gestures are often the most smallest and unseen.
Is that a quote by M?
I think it might be.
I see it with the pretty font. Okay, I want to make sure we get to this. So talk to me about what is it like to embrace body liberation in a fat clear body?
Oh, it's fun.
You're allowed to have fun in body liberation? What?
Yeah, it's super. So I am someone that secretly gets off on other people being a little uncomfortable by things that they should have accepted a long time ago and can't because the system says that you can't. So my body just being in a room, and I'll scan a room and I will see people squirm because I'm fat and they can't tell what gender my body is anymore. And depending upon how I'm dressed that day, I confuse people. And for me, there is a thrill in challenging people to re-understand what human beings even are. Because human beings are so much more complicated than fat versus thin, male or female, right? Like when you look at skin tone, right? How many beautiful colors are out there that our skin could be? Like human beings are so diverse. And so for me, there's a fun and a playfulness in being myself and knowing that being myself teaches people a lesson in some way, even if it's that they experience discomfort by different. I think what I have found hard is embracing my own voice and feeling like I belong in this space, which is ironic, right? It's a space that's supposed to be meant for me, and yet often I worry about, is what I have to offer enough? Is what I say wrong? Like, do I understand this enough to be someone in this space, in this body, or am I going to teach people to perpetuate harm because I haven't learned enough about my relationship with my body? And the answer is probably, and that's okay, because I'm not going to learn if I hold back. But I definitely struggled with, what does it mean to have a voice in this space, to feel like I belong? Like when you asked me to do this, I was like, do you know who I am? Someone knows who I am. Someone likes the things that I said. What?
Oh my God.
Right? Which like is probably true for all of us doing this work. I bet if we all like laid it out on the table, we all probably feel like we don't belong in the space that's meant for us. And we all probably wonder if what we have to offer is enough. And I equate it to like the conversation that we have in our house a lot is, you know, I worry about, am I trans and non-binary enough? What do I need to do to feel that? And is that a feeling internally? Or is that something that getting this external message? And often, like when you break it down, it's that external message. But body liberation has allowed me to understand that the external message is often that part of our culture that I'm trying to unlearn that continues to be a barrier in those moments.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm imagining that one of the reasons that people like me and people like you, and maybe everyone that's in fat liberation, thinks, do I belong here, and has a little imposter syndrome, is because anyone that enters this space probably doesn't have that mediocre white male confidence, right? It's a whole group of people that don't have that. So we're just walking around the world like, am I okay? Did I do enough? Am I doing enough? Like, am I going to get in trouble?
No, totally. The in trouble thing. It's like we all think we have a permanent record. Like, I don't have a report card anymore. What am I worried about? Not that those things mattered to begin with, but don't get me started on our education system. But like, why do I walk around life waiting for someone to give me an A? And that is like, that is the biggest thing I've gotten out of like having my body be my body in this movement, is like, I deserve more than to be graded. I actually deserve a lot more than that, so I don't need to worry about it.
You deserve the best ice cream party at school.
Yes, that's all I ever wanted. That's all I always want.
Yes. So I imagine that you haven't always been in this place where like joy comes easy in your body, or you even enjoy making people a little uncomfortable when they like first meet you or they're in the room with you. I'm sure this could be a really long story, but like, can you talk about how you've gotten here?
Yeah, I mean, so like the first time that someone suggested a diet to me, I was like 7 or 8, and my pediatrician told my mom I needed to drink more water and try Jenny Craig. And why you would suggest that to an 8-year-old is beyond me. And at that point, I can remember like just enjoying my little kid life and not even being aware that my body could be different from other people's. And from what my parents have told me about me growing up, different bodies never bothered me. My friends were my friends, and it's not that I didn't see color. I knew they were different than me, but it didn't faze me that there was something wrong with that. So like, good job, mom and dad. It didn't faze me. Doctors started saying things. And then, you know, I have extended family that have their own ideas about diet culture and are very fat phobic. And so as I grew up and just had a naturally bigger body, we'd be at holidays and people would be saying things and commenting on what I was eating or how my body was changing. I had a lot of trauma growing up, so I think that really did it. And so, you know, I developed an eating disorder at a really young age that no one thought, because when you're in a bigger body, restriction is not only expected, it's prescribed. Like, my eating disorder was a script given to me by a doctor of exactly how to restrict to lose weight, exactly how to over-exercise to burn fat, exactly how to even abuse laxatives or diet pills or things that no 14, 15-year-old should be doing or knowing. And I mean, that went on into my early 20s. I was engaged to someone before my partner, who I'm married to. We had a horrible, destructive relationship where my body was used against me to make me unworthy of being loved the way I deserve to be loved. And my mom stepped in and said, all of this needs to change. You're leaving this relationship. You're leaving this home. You're coming home. You're focusing on college. And we're going to figure this out together. And, you know, my mom has dementia now, so that is something that I kind of like grieve in the process and in the story. But, you know, she played a really big role in just being like, you have suffered unnecessarily for 20-something years. And I've participated in that by not protecting you enough, by telling family we would visit when they probably weren't the people you should be visiting. And I'm sorry. And I think that's what I needed, was like, my mom was my best friend growing up, so she could do no wrong. And to this day, I still think that she's a perfect angel, even though she did a lot wrong. And having someone that I thought was infallible admit that not only were they fallible, but they had hurt me, that in trying to fiercely love me, they also could fiercely hurt me. And that was going to be part of being human. And that's when I actually like kind of started my own journey of like not going to the gym all the time, of like getting my recovery and like healing from an eating disorder in this place. And when that all kind of came about, that's when I realized I wanted to do art therapy. And in my art therapy journey, really connecting with that inner part of myself, I was able to kind of break into the eating disorder field and discover body liberation. And then so this is where I'm super grateful. I firmly believe, because of my childhood experiences, that you shouldn't ask someone to do something you wouldn't do yourself. So I would never tell someone to diet because I did it and it sucked. So it meant that the way that I have decided to be a professional really lent itself to this movement. And so the more I learned about it, the more I was like, well, I've got to go do all the things before I give this to clients. So I did the full course of intuitive eating. I've done all I've done all the things. And so I've landed here because I've done all the things. And once I do all the things, it's never enough, but this became enough, because this is forever moving and changing, right? Like, body liberation is not this stuck point. It's the further I move, the further it moves with me, and we get to be on this journey together. And actually, I owe a lot of even like discovering my transness and being comfortable being out to this idea of body liberation. Because my body wasn't tied to this idea of what it was supposed to be. I was finally able to allow it to be what I needed it to be. And I didn't need it to be thin. I just needed it to not be called woman. I didn't need it to be a different skin tone or have longer hair or whatever those beauty ideals were that I was chasing. I actually needed it to not be those things, and to understand that those things would keep me safe And if I wanted to do them, it was going to be to do them to be safe. It was no longer going to be to do them because I had to. And then I had to make a choice. And for me, sacrificing safety for being myself is a privilege that I get to have that not everybody gets to have.
Right. Right. And it sounds like creating this internal safety versus like safe in community.
Yep. Because the reality is, I don't know where there can ever be safe in community for us right now. Like, just anyone born with a uterus, anyone queer, anyone not white, a lot of us, I think, are struggling together right now. And so I think once you find that safety in yourself and permission to be yourself, regardless of what harm will happen to you, it's just a more realistic way of being, and it works for me. And I don't expect everyone else to, today come out in all ways and live their truth and be in danger. I know that I have privileges, like I can afford a security system at my home, but I need a security system at my home. I've had experiences, unfortunately, that tell me that's necessary.
Right. Yeah, that's such a good point. So I loved how you described that like body liberation and the journey that you went on gives you space to like always be transforming, which is the opposite of everything that we're taught in relation to health and diet culture. It's this lie that like once I make enough changes, then I'll be happy. Like there's this really definite goalpost that none of us ever get to, and then we hate ourselves and we all end up with eating disorders. So I loved how you described like this is sustainable because it's acceptance over time, and it allows for like never-ending transformation, which is so cool.
Well, I mean, isn't that the truth? Is like today you are a day older than you were yesterday. Like you're going to keep evolving. It's like there's a great Instagram account, I think it's called Streaming and Glitter. They are disabled and non-binary. They are also bald and have fabulous glasses and the best glittery makeup. And today they were talking about this idea that everyone is pre-disabled until they become disabled. That there's no abled and disabled. It's actually that at any point in time you can become disabled. You don't know how old age will affect you. You don't know what will happen to you tomorrow. That really, like, we're all going to constantly transform until we're not here anymore in this form. So you kind of have to constantly be comfortable with the fact that tomorrow's going to look very different than today by design.
Mm-hmm. I really like that. All right. Why don't we end on something really light, which is the overturning of Roe v. Wade and how that affects all of the people with uteri. Do we want to talk a little bit about that?
Let's talk about how we discovered the term uteri.
I mean, it sounds like a word to me, so I'm going to use it for the rest of my life and think about you.
Yay! I know. So in my head, I see little cartoon uteri holding hands, like skipping through.
So adorable. I'm looking over this kind of like brief thing that you wrote up for our live today, and it's like, how does this affect, both of us as different folks, both with uterus? And the first thing that came to mind for me is like, this might be the first time for many straight white women that they feel like their freedom and bodily autonomy is being taken away, and that's why we're freaking the fuck out. But perhaps for a lot of other folks, they're like, been there, done that, get used to it, like one more thing that's being taken away from me. So I'm sure that's why people like me are losing my shit, but there might be less shit losing in other communities. I don't know.
So my experience so far has been that many are the way that I think like cis white women are. However, what we are losing our shit about is that this turnover means you can undo anything that's been done and you can keep oppressing bodies. And if you take away bodily autonomy, you take away my ability to be trans. You literally rob my medical affirmation and potentially even my ability to publicly say who I am.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That just makes me think, so now, like, you've never had this community safety, and now there's systems in place trying to take away your internal safety. So what do you have left?
I have art. So when I started my art therapy journey, I got really into political art and did a thesis on specifically like political art making, and statistically relevant, got published, fancy, blah, blah, blah. And so whenever stuff like this happens, I go back to how can I make something that will speak for me? Because I feel like there is no way I can speak for myself right now. So I'm staring at them. I've got these 4 manuscripts that I'm working on this, I call it kind of like the non-binary body project, where like a bunch of us are working on art for a panel on like what it's like to be in our bodies during this time specifically, especially to have identities that are so like fluid and in the middle that people already don't understand. And I have found that really helpful. And honestly, like every time someone who's not trans posts it's not about women, it's about everyone with a uterus, I feel a little bit better. Because the more we can correct our language, even around how we talk about bodies, the easier it is. Because saying that this affects women versus people with uteri, think of how many more people this really affects and how many more people can work together when you use that inclusive language. And that's where internal safety comes back, because we recreate community that way.
Oh, I love that so much. How empowering to just expand our network even more people to fight.
Well, think about it. If the system had its way, you and I would be fighting right now about whose body is more affected by this, right? It could be, but instead we can be here together, joining in this, having this discussion, and knowing that you are in New York and I am in Connecticut, and we have each other.
Oh, my little heart needed that today. Yeah, that's so right. Thank you for saying that. So I hear even, when things are scary, it feels like freedom is taken away, or bodily autonomy is taken away, that you search for these things that reinforce your sense of community and maybe give you joy and can express the scary things you're going through, even if it's not you saying it out loud.
I mean, for me personally, I'm an introverted extrovert, so anytime I can find community on things like the internet, where like I see friends that I know that I've met through Instagram are like on and have made comments and hi and I love you and thank you so much for being part of my world, because those are those little moments where like stuff like this can feel a little less scary. And my partner and I say this to each other often at night, like, it's okay if the world is scary, you don't have to be scared.
Ah, that's right. Beautiful. And isn't it also okay to find like little glimmers of joy? It feels like the world's falling apart. And I think this is important for allies too, because we get really caught up in like doom and gloom and guilt and everything is shit for everyone and like I'm a piece of shit and I need to, but like there's joy, like there's so much joy available in this movement, and it's like really okay to dig into that and celebrate it and help people celebrate their bodies. Like we don't have to just get stuck in the mud. And it's people like me that it's easier for me to dig myself out of the mud because I have so much privilege. So I almost feel like it's a responsibility to like find the good stuff and find the joy, because I have access to it still.
I mean, send someone a silly meme, throw glitter at a friend, bring someone a cupcake or an ice cream cone. Here, I'll give you all. So today, I think we talked about this. Today is Frida Kahlo's birthday, and the little bit of joy that my dad once gave me that I keep in my office is, let's see. This is my Frida Kahlo finger puppet.
I can't.
Oh, Frida, she would hate this. It's so commercialized and so against everything she was. But it just like this, something as little as this. I like look over at my desk next to me and I'm like, that's hilarious. I love life.
Oh my gosh, I adore that. So cute. And like talk about seeing wavelength. I was like, I like to have like something to fiddle with next to me during things that make me anxious. This is so silly. This is a garlic snape, but it looks like
That's so pretty. It does.
And I've been carrying this around for 3 days like a toy. Like I bing people with it, and I like make directions. Like
that's how I know you're from upstate New York, because I did the same thing as a kid. And I'm from upstate New York, and that was like, my mom would be like, go play in the grass, and I'd be like, I'll collect the wands.
Yeah, I got my wands. And the day that this shrivels and dies, I will cry, and I will have to go find a new garlic snape wand.
Yeah.
I'm glad we've got our little things by our side for joy.
Me too.
All right. So why don't we start to wrap up? Is there
Yeah.
anything else that you want to share or you want to say before we end?
I mean, oh, people are so kind. Everyone's so nice. You're all wonderful. Um, when all else fails, we can burn this down together and build something new. And I think that's so important for people to hear. There was a statistic the other day, again, I'm a nerd, that like every massive empire falls after 250 years historically. America's on 245. So like now's the time to like break it down and build something new
Mhm.
and make something that is inclusive, make something built for queer people, for trans people, for women, for people of color, for immigrants, for all the people that have actually built this and that we've let other people destroy for us.
Mhm. Mhm.
And like at night, it's okay if you want to sit there and imagine it all burning and you building something new, because there's actually something really beautiful in that. And I think it's okay if we all want to join in that right now.
It's totally okay. And that feels like good and hopeful and empowering. Um, and shit has to fall apart before it can be rebuilt, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's true for everything. Everything dies either with a whisper or a scream. And this world is going to die with a scream and probably be rebuilt with a whisper. And I think that we can be part of that.
Mm, I'm here for it.
Me too.
Let me get my matches.
Yes. My partner will love this. He's going to watch this and be like, you told me I wasn't allowed Molotov cocktails. And I was like, you're not.
Mm?
But Sam can have matches. I'm going to hear it later.
All right. I am so, so grateful for you for all your work this week and for this live. This was really lovely. And I hope that other allies will see this and see this experience and not be as afraid now. You know, there is like a lot of love in this community. There's so much opportunity for change and for growth and for us to use our privilege in good ways. Like it doesn't have to be so scary. It's okay.
It is. And it's okay if you don't know what to do. You can ask.
Yeah, it's all good. All right. I hope you have just such a okay evening. Maybe that's a good expectation.
Me too. I mean, I'm about to like order pizza and watch The Real Housewives because nothing makes me feel better about my life than watching other people that have so much be so unhappy.
That's a really good tactic. I like that. I hope you have such a good night with that.
Thank you.
All right. I'll talk to you later.
Thank you so much, Sam. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.